Tapkam tape. A dawn in the Rhineland, the first light touches the Rhine Valley like a whispered prayer, soft and golden, spreading across the rolling hills of the German countryside. The year is 1098, and the world moves to a different rhythm here. No rush of traffic, no buzz of electric lights, just the gentle lowing of cattle in distant meadows, the splash of water wheels turning in the morning current, and the bells of distant monasteries calling the faithful to prayer. This is the Rhineland, a place where ancient Roman roads wind through forests thick with oak and beech, where vineyards cling to hillsides that have known the footsteps of pilgrims and merchants for centuries. The air carries the scent of wood smoke from cottage hearths, the earthy richness of turned soil, and something else, something that speaks of possibility, of divine mystery waiting to unfold. In the village of Bermersheim, nestled among these gentle hills, a child draws her first breath. Her name is Hildegard, and though no one knows it yet, she will become one of the most extraordinary women of her age, a mystic, a healer, a composer whose music will echo through centuries, a woman who will dare to speak with the voice of God in a world that rarely listened to women at all. But for now, she is simply a baby in her mother's arms, born to Hildebert and Mechthild von Bermersheim, a family of minor nobility with lands that stretch across these fertile valleys. The von Bermersheims are not wealthy by the standards of great lords, but they are comfortable. They have enough to feed their children, enough to offer hospitality to travelers, enough to give generously to the church that shapes every aspect of medieval life. The morning mist rises from the Rhine, curling upward like incense, and in that mist, perhaps, we can glimpse the future that awaits this newborn child. She will see visions that blaze like living fire. She will heal the sick with herbs gathered from these very hillsides. She will write music that captures the sound of angels, and letters that will reach popes and emperors. But such knowledge belongs to tomorrow. Today, there is only the soft breathing of a sleeping infant, and the ancient rhythms of a world awakening to another day. Hildegard is the 10th child born to Hildebert and Mechthild, their tithe child, as medieval families called it. In those days, it was common for families to dedicate their 10th child to God's service, a living offering, a way of giving back a portion of their blessings to the church that provided structure and meaning to their lives. From her earliest days, little Hildegard seems different, touched by something beyond the ordinary. Her parents notice it first in her eyes, the way she stares at things they cannot see, following movements in empty air with the focused attention of a cat watching prey. Sometimes she laughs at nothing, or nothing they can perceive. Sometimes she grows very still, very quiet, as if listening to voices only she can hear. The other children in the household whisper about their youngest sister. The servants cross themselves when they pass her cradle, but Mechthild, her mother, watches with a mixture of wonder and worry. She has heard stories of children touched by the divine, saints in the making perhaps, but also souls destined for suffering. For in the medieval world, to be chosen by God often means to walk a path of thorns. The seasons turn, spring melting into summer, summer fading to autumn, winter settling over the Rhineland like a familiar blanket. Hildegard grows from infant to toddler, taking her first steps on the stone floors of her father's hall, speaking her first words in the mixture of Latin and German that fills the air of noble households. And still, the visions continue. She tells her nurse about the beautiful lady who visits her at night, dressed in robes that shine like starlight. She speaks of animals that glow with inner fire, of trees that sing with human voices. Her family doesn't know what to make of these stories. Are they the imaginings of a clever child or something more? By the time Hildegard reaches her 8th year, her parents have made their decision. The child's gifts, whatever they may be, require guidance that they cannot provide. She needs teachers who understand the mysteries of faith, who can help her navigate the strange landscape of her inner world. And so arrangements are made, letters written, negotiations conducted with the careful formality that governs all such transactions in the medieval world. Hildegard will be sent to the monastery of Disi-Bodenberg, where she will be placed in the care of Jutta von Sponheim, a woman who has chosen to live as an anchoress, walled away from the world in a small cell attached to the monastery church. It might seem a harsh fate to modern minds, an 8-year-old child sent away from family and familiar surroundings to live in what amounts to holy imprisonment. But in Hildegard's time, it represents opportunity, a chance for education, for spiritual development, for a life of purpose and meaning. Few women of any age have access to learning. Fewer still can hope to influence the great affairs of the world. Under Jutta's guidance, Hildegard will learn to read and write, not just in German, but in Latin, the language of scholarship and diplomacy. She will study the scriptures, the writings of the Church Fathers, the accumulated wisdom of centuries. She will learn the arts of healing, the properties of herbs, the movements of the stars, and perhaps most importantly, she will learn to understand the visions that have marked her since childhood, to see them not as a burden or a source of fear, but as a gift beyond price. The journey from Bermersheim to Disi-Bodenberg takes 2 days on horseback, 2 days for a child to say goodbye to everything she has known and embrace a future she cannot yet imagine. The road winds through forests and valleys, past villages where people pause in their work to watch the small procession pass. "A nobleman's daughter," they whisper to each other, "going to serve God at the monastery." Some cross themselves, others nod approvingly. All understand that they are witnessing a moment of significance, a life being offered up to purposes greater than the ordinary world provides. As they approach Disi-Bodenberg, the monastery bells ring out across the valley, the same bells that have marked the hours of prayer for generations, calling the faithful to worship at dawn, at midday, at sunset, in the deep watches of the night. The sound seems to welcome Hildegard, to promise her a place in an ancient rhythm of devotion that connects earth to heaven. The monastery itself rises from the hillside like something grown rather than built. Its stone walls weathered by centuries of rain and sun, its towers reaching toward the sky with quiet confidence. This will be her home now. These corridors where monks walk in silent contemplation, this chapel where voices rise in plain song that seems to echo the music of the spheres. And somewhere within these walls, Jutta von Sponheim waits, the woman who will become Hildegard's teacher, her spiritual mother, her guide into mysteries that few souls ever glimpse. Jutta has already heard whispers about her new pupil, the child who sees visions, who speaks with angels, who carries within her small frame the seeds of something extraordinary. The sun is setting as Hildegard's party reaches the monastery gates, the same golden light that blessed her birth now painting the ancient stones with warmth and promise. In a few moments, she will cross the threshold into her new life. She will begin the journey that will transform her from a nobleman's daughter into one of history's most remarkable women. But for now, there is only this moment of transition, this pause between what was and what will be. The Rhine flows on in the distance, carrying its burden of history toward the sea. The bells continue their eternal calling, and somewhere in the gathering dusk, the future waits to unfold, patient as starlight, certain as dawn. The great adventure is about to begin. Chapter 80. Within the walls of Disi-Bodenberg, the morning mist still clings to the valley when young Hildegard first glimpses the walls of Disi-Bodenberg. The monastery rises from the hillside like something grown from the earth itself. Ancient stone weathered to the color of dove wings, towers reaching toward heaven with quiet confidence. This will be her world now. These walls will hold her childhood, shape her thoughts, and nurture the extraordinary gifts that already stir within her 8-year-old heart. The great wooden doors swing open with a sound that seems to echo through centuries. Inside, the air carries the scent of beeswax candles and aged parchment, of herbs drying in bundles and incense that has seeped into the very stones. This is the smell of devotion made tangible, of prayers offered up through countless dawns and dusks. Jutta von Sponheim awaits her new charge in the cloister courtyard. At 26, Jutta has already earned a reputation for wisdom that draws pilgrims from distant lands. Her face holds the serene beauty of someone who has found peace in surrender, yet her eyes sparkle with an intelligence that misses nothing. She will be more than teacher to Hildegard. She will be mother, mentor, and guide through the mysteries of both earthly knowledge and divine understanding. "Welcome, little one," Jutta says, her voice carrying the warmth of summer honey. "These walls have been waiting for you, and perhaps they have." Disibodenberg has stood for nearly 2 centuries, its Benedictine community following the ancient rhythm that Saint Benedict prescribed, a life balanced between prayer, study, and work. Ora et labora, pray and work. The simple formula that has sustained monastic life since the 6th century, creating islands of learning and peace in a world often torn by violence and uncertainty. The bells that mark the canonical hours become the heartbeat of Hildegard's new existence. Matins in the deep of night, lauds at dawn, prime, terce, sext, none, vespers, and compline, marking the passage of each day like pearls on a string. 7 times daily, the community gathers in the chapel to lift their voices in praise. 7 times daily, Hildegard learns to set aside whatever task occupies her hands and turn her attention to the eternal. But between these moments of communal prayer, a rich world of learning unfolds. In the scriptorium, where patient monks copy manuscripts by hand, Hildegard discovers the magic of letters transformed into words, words into ideas, ideas into understanding. The scratch of quill on parchment becomes a familiar music. The careful formation of each letter teaches her that knowledge is precious, something to be preserved with reverence and shared with care. Jutta proves to be a teacher of remarkable breadth. Under her guidance, Hildegard learns to read Latin as easily as her native German. She studies the Psalms until their rhythms flow through her thoughts like water through a stream bed. The stories of the saints become as familiar as family tales. Catherine with her wheel, Agnes with her lamb, Cecilia with her music that could move stones to tears. But Jutta's teaching extends far beyond books and prayers. In the monastery's herb garden, she introduces Hildegard to the healing properties of plants, how feverfew soothes headaches, how chamomile calms troubled sleep, how willow bark eases pain. Each plant holds secrets written in leaf and root and flower. Each remedy connects the physical world to the spiritual, body to soul, earth to heaven. God speaks through all creation, Jutta explains as they walk between rows of sage and rosemary. We must learn to listen with more than our ears. These words take root in Hildegard's heart like seeds in fertile ground. Already gifted with visions that dance behind her closed eyelids, she begins to understand that her unusual experiences might not be burden, but blessing. Jutta listens without judgment when the child describes the light she sees, the voices she hears, the knowing that comes from somewhere beyond ordinary understanding. The monastery library becomes another sanctuary for the growing girl. Here, manuscripts preserve the wisdom of ages, the writings of Augustine and Jerome, the natural philosophy of Pliny, the medical knowledge of ancient Greek physicians. Brother Volmar, the monastery's most learned scribe, notices Hildegard's hunger for knowledge and becomes her willing guide through these treasures. Volmar is a man of middle years whose gentle manner conceals a brilliant mind. He has spent decades copying and illuminating manuscripts, and his fingers are permanently stained with ink, badges of honor in the service of learning. When he sees how quickly Hildegard absorbs everything placed before her, he begins to suspect that this quiet child might be destined for something extraordinary. She asks questions that would challenge a university master. He confides to Jutta one evening as they watch Hildegard bent over a text in the fading light. And sometimes her answers seem to come from somewhere beyond her years. Indeed, even in these early days, there are signs of the remarkable woman Hildegard will become. When the community gathers for theological discussions, she listens with an intensity that seems to draw meaning from the very air. When they sing the daily offices, her voice carries a purity that makes others pause in wonder. When she tends the sick in the monastery's infirmary, her touch brings comfort that goes beyond technique. The seasons turn within the monastery walls like pages in an illuminated manuscript. Spring brings the garden to life with tender green shoots pushing through dark earth. Summer fills the air with the drone of bees and the perfume of roses climbing the cloister walls. Autumn arrives with the harvest of herbs and the golden light that seems to bless everything it touches. Winter wraps the community in contemplative silence, when the only sounds are wind in the eaves and the soft chanting that rises from the chapel like incense. Through all these seasons, Hildegard grows, not just in stature, but in understanding. The visions that once frightened her begin to feel like conversations with the divine. The knowledge she gains in study starts to weave itself into a tapestry of wisdom that will one day astound the learned men of her age. The compassion she learns in caring for others becomes the foundation of a healing ministry that will draw people from across Europe. But perhaps most importantly, within these protective walls, Hildegard learns to trust her own voice. In a world that rarely listens to women, Jutta and the community at Disibodenberg create a space where a young girl's insights are valued, where her questions are welcomed, where her gifts are nurtured rather than suppressed. "Never be afraid of what God has given you," Jutta tells her one evening as they sit in the garden watching stars emerge in the darkening sky. "The world needs what you carry. The world needs your light." These words will echo through all the years to come, through the triumphs and struggles that await beyond these walls, through the moments when Hildegard will be called to stand before popes and emperors with nothing but her conviction to sustain her. But that is still years away. For now, there is only this peaceful sanctuary, this time of preparation, this gentle cultivation of gifts that will one day flower into greatness. The bells ring, complete the final prayer of the day. Soon the monastery will settle into the deep quiet of night, when even the stones seem to rest. But somewhere in that silence, the future continues to take shape, patient as prayer, certain as dawn. The scribe and the visionary, years pass like pages turning in an illuminated manuscript. The young girl who once trembled at her visions now moves through the monastery corridors with quiet confidence, her step sure, her purpose clear. Hildegard has grown into her gifts. By her 20th year, she has become indispensable to the daily rhythms of Disibodenberg. Her knowledge of herbs rivals that of the monastery's physician. Her copying hand produces manuscripts so beautiful that visiting abbots request her work specifically. But it is something else entirely that sets her apart, something that cannot be taught or copied or contained within the usual boundaries of monastic life. The visions have not ceased. If anything, they have grown stronger, more vivid, more insistent. What began as childhood glimpses of light has evolved into elaborate revelations that arrive with the force of divine command. Hildegard no longer fears them. She has learned to welcome them, to prepare for them, to receive them as sacred gifts. The scriptorium becomes her sanctuary within the sanctuary. Here, surrounded by the tools of her trade, parchment and ink, quills carefully cut and sharpened, she begins the work that will define her legacy. Brother Volmar has become more than her teacher. He is her collaborator, her witness, her faithful scribe. "Tell me again about the light," he says softly, his pen poised above fresh parchment. His voice holds no skepticism, no doubt, only deep attention. Hildegard closes her eyes, returning to the vision that visited her during morning prayers. It comes from above, but also from within, like sunlight through stained glass, but the glass is my very soul, and in that light I see— Her voice trails off as she searches for words adequate to the task. How does one describe the indescribable? How does one translate the language of the divine into the limited vocabulary of human speech? "I see the interconnectedness of all creation," she continues, her words coming slowly, carefully chosen. "Every herb in the garden, every star in the heavens, every soul seeking God, all connected by threads of light that pulse with divine love." Volmar's pen moves steadily across the parchment, capturing her words with reverent precision. He has developed his own shorthand for these sessions, symbols and abbreviations that allow him to keep pace with the flow of revelation. Later, they will work together to refine the language, to find the precise theological terms that will make her visions accessible to scholars and seekers alike. The desk where they work has been specially prepared for this purpose. Positioned near the scriptorium's largest window, it catches the morning light that streams through glass panels set high in the stone wall. The surface is smooth oak, worn to silk by countless hours of use. Here lie the tools of sacred scholarship. The instruments of divine translation. Ink wells sit in careful rows, each containing a different color: black for text, red for illuminated capitals, gold for the most sacred names. Brushes of varying sizes rest beside them, their bristles soft and perfectly shaped. Sheets of parchment, prepared from the finest calfskin, await the touch of inspired words. But the most important element of this workspace cannot be seen or touched. It is the atmosphere of deep listening that Hildegard and Volmar have cultivated together, a quality of attention so focused, so reverent, that it seems to invite the divine presence into their collaboration. The vision continues, Hildegard says, opening her eyes to meet Volmar's patient gaze. I see humanity as if from a great height, not with judgment, but with infinite compassion. Each person carries a spark of the divine light, some burning brightly, others dimmed by suffering or sin, but none extinguished, never extinguished. As Volmar records these words, other monks move quietly through the scriptorium, attending to their own copying work. The soft scratch of quills on parchment creates a gentle symphony, a sound that speaks of knowledge preserved, wisdom shared, truth carefully transmitted from one generation to the next. Hildegard has found her place in this ancient chain of transmission, but her contribution is unique. Where other scribes copy existing texts, the writings of the Church Fathers, the Gospels, the Psalms, she is recording something entirely new. Revelations that have never before been given voice. Visions that arrive fresh from the divine source. The theological implications are staggering, and Hildegard knows it. She's not merely a copyist or a commentator. She's claiming direct access to divine revelation, positioning herself as a prophet in an age when such claims, especially from women, are viewed with deep suspicion. Yet she cannot remain silent. The visions come with their own authority, their own undeniable truth. To ignore them would be to deny the very purpose for which she was born. Brother Volmar, she says during a pause in their work, do you ever doubt? Do you ever wonder if we are presuming too much? The monk sets down his pen and considers her question with the same careful attention he brings to everything. I have learned to trust not my own understanding, but the fruits of what we record together. When your words illuminate Scripture in new ways, when they bring comfort to the troubled, when they reveal the beauty of God's creation with such clarity that even the simplest monk can grasp it, how can I doubt? His faith strengthens her own. In a world where women's voices are so often silenced or dismissed, Volmar's unwavering support feels like a miracle in itself. He sees her not as an anomaly to be contained, but as an instrument of divine will to be honored and protected. The afternoon light shifts, casting longer shadows across their workspace. Soon it will be time for vespers, then evening meal, then the final prayers of Compline. But the work will continue tomorrow, and the day after, and for all the years to come. For Hildegard has begun to understand that this is her calling, not just to receive visions, but to record them, to share them, to build a bridge between the divine realm and the human world through the careful craft of words. The manuscripts growing under their hands will outlive them both. They will carry Hildegard's revelations far beyond the walls of Disibodenberg, into universities and cathedrals, into the private chambers of popes and emperors, into the hearts of seekers yet unborn. But that vast influence still lies in the future. For now, there is only this quiet room, this sacred partnership, this patient work of translation. The divine speaks. Hildegard listens. Volmar records. And slowly, carefully, something unprecedented takes shape. A woman's voice, raised in prophecy. A new chapter in the long story of human encounter with the divine, a light that will burn bright for centuries to come. a garden of healing and knowledge. But even as these sacred words take form on parchment, Hildegard's attention turns to another realm of divine revelation. Beyond the scriptorium walls, in the carefully tended gardens of Disse-Bodenberg, she discovers God's healing wisdom, written in leaf and root, in flower and stem. The monastery garden becomes her second sanctuary. Here, among the neat rows of herbs and medicinal plants, she learns to read another kind of sacred text, one written in chlorophyll and sap, in the subtle chemistry of nature's pharmacy. Watch her now in the early morning light, moving slowly between the planted beds. Her hands, still ink-stained from yesterday's writing, reach out to touch the silver-green leaves of sage, the delicate fronds of fennel, the sturdy stalks of comfrey. Each plant whispers its secrets to her. Each one reveals its particular gift of healing. This is where Hildegard begins to understand what she will later call viriditas, the greenness, the life force that flows through all living things. It's more than botany, more than simple herbalism. It's a mystical understanding of the interconnectedness of all creation, the way divine energy moves through every growing thing. She kneels beside a patch of plantain, its broad leaves already showing the morning dew. In years to come, she will write of this humble plant with reverence, describing how its cool, moist nature can soothe inflammation, how its leaves, when crushed and applied to wounds, can speed the body's natural healing. But for now, she simply observes, learning the plant's particular way of being in the world. The monastery's infirmary becomes her laboratory. Under the guidance of the older sisters, she learns to prepare tinctures and salves, to dry herbs at precisely the right moment to preserve their potency, to combine plants in ways that enhance their individual properties. Her hands grow skilled at this ancient work, this collaboration between human wisdom and nature's gifts. Nettle teaches her about the paradox of healing, how something that stings can also strengthen. She learns to harvest it carefully, with respect for its fierce protection of itself, and discovers how, when properly prepared, it can cleanse the blood and restore vitality to those weakened by illness. Fennel reveals its warming nature, its ability to ease digestion and calm the stomach's rebellion. She watches how the brothers and sisters seek it out after heavy meals, how its gentle action brings comfort without force. There's a lesson here about healing, about working with the body rather than against it. The roses in the monastery garden are not merely ornamental. Hildegard learns to see them as medicine, their petals holding properties that can lift the spirit and ease melancholy. She discovers how to distill their essence into waters that refresh both body and soul, how their gentle astringency can tone and strengthen delicate tissues. But it's not only individual plants that capture her attention. She begins to understand the garden as a whole system, the way different plants support each other, how some repel harmful insects while others attract beneficial ones. This interconnectedness speaks to her of divine design, of a wisdom that operates on levels beyond human comprehension. In the monastery kitchen, another dimension of healing unfolds. Food, Hildegard realizes, is medicine in its most basic form. The daily bread, the simple stews, the carefully prepared broths, all of these carry the potential for healing or harm, depending on their quality and preparation. She learns about the warming properties of spelt, how this ancient grain provides steady nourishment without the heaviness that can burden digestion. She observes how different people thrive on different foods, how what strengthens one person might weaken another. This leads her toward an understanding of individual constitution, of the need to tailor healing approaches to each person's unique nature. Ginger from the monastery's stores teaches her about the power of warmth, how it can stimulate sluggish digestion and bring circulation to cold extremities. She learns to prepare it in different ways. Fresh for acute conditions, dried and powdered for gentler, longer-lasting effects. The simple act of preparing meals becomes a meditation on nourishment. She watches the cook sisters selecting vegetables, noting which ones are at their peak of vitality, which ones are past their prime. She learns that timing matters, that plants gathered at the right moment, prepared with care and attention, carry more healing power than those treated carelessly. Wine, in moderation, reveals its capacity to warm the heart and aid digestion, but Hildegard also observes its dangers, how excess can cloud the mind and weaken the body's natural defenses. Balance, she realizes, is key to all healing, the middle path between deficiency and excess. Her understanding deepens as she tends to the sick. A sister with persistent headaches finds relief when Hildegard prepares a compress of lavender and rose, their cooling properties drawing heat away from the inflamed head. A brother suffering from joint pain improves when she prepares warming salves from rosemary and sage, their penetrating oils carrying healing deep into affected tissues. Slowly, carefully, she begins to document what she learns. Her observations fill margins of manuscripts, notes about which preparations work best for different conditions, records of successful treatments and failed experiments. This will eventually grow into her great work on natural medicine, the Physica, that will preserve her healing wisdom for future generations. But that comprehensive work lies years in the future. For now, there is simply this daily practice, this patient observation, this growing understanding of how divine wisdom expresses itself through the natural world. In quiet moments, she sits at her simple wooden desk in her cell, surrounded by bundles of drying herbs. The air carries their mingled fragrances, chamomile's apple-like sweetness, rosemary's sharp clarity, the earthy richness of comfrey root. Her hands move between quill and mortar, between writing and preparation, weaving together the intellectual and the practical aspects of healing. She begins to see connections, patterns that link the spiritual visions she receives to the physical healing she practices. The same divine energy that speaks to her in mystical experiences also flows through the plants in the garden. The same wisdom that guides her prophetic writings also reveals itself in the subtle art of herbal medicine. The monastery's rhythm supports this integration. Morning prayers give way to garden work. Afternoon study flows into evening preparation of medicines. Each activity enriches the others, creating a seamless whole where contemplation and action, prayer and practice, vision and healing work together in harmony. As autumn approaches, the garden begins its own transformation. Hildegard helps with the harvest, gathering seeds for next year's planting, drying herbs for winter use, preparing the concentrated medicines that will sustain the community through the darker months ahead. This seasonal cycle teaches her about patience, about working with natural rhythms rather than against them. Some healing happens quickly, but the deepest transformations take time, require the same patient tending that brings a garden from seed to harvest. The light grows softer now, the days shorter. But in Hildegard's cell, surrounded by her carefully preserved medicines, her growing collection of observations, her deepening understanding of nature's wisdom, a different kind of light burns steady and bright, the light of knowledge gained through reverent attention, of healing wisdom earned through patient practice, of divine truth revealed through the humble work of tending and preparing, of watching and learning, of serving those in need with whatever gifts have been given. Rupertsberg, a new beginning. And with this light burning within her, Hildegard begins to envision something that has never been attempted before, something that will require every ounce of courage she has cultivated, every lesson learned in the garden and scriptorium, every moment of divine guidance she has received. She sees a new monastery, not an addition to Disse-Bodenberg, not a small cell tucked away in someone else's vision, but an entirely independent community of women, a place where her growing sisterhood can flourish, where their gifts can be fully realized, where the divine feminine wisdom she has been receiving can take root and grow. The vision comes to her during prayer on a winter morning in 1147. She is 49 years old, no longer the uncertain child who arrived at these walls decades ago. The community of women under her care has grown. 18 sisters now, each bringing her own gifts, each seeking space to serve God in her own way. But space is exactly what they lack at Disibodenberg. The men's monastery has expanded over the years, claiming more rooms, more resources, more attention. The women's quarters feel increasingly cramped, their needs increasingly secondary. Hildegard watches her sisters, sees their potential constrained by walls that were never meant to hold their growing light. When she approaches Abbot Kuno with her vision, his response is swift and decisive. Absolutely not. His voice carries the authority of decades in religious leadership, but also something else. Fear, perhaps. At the thought of losing the prestige that Hildegard's growing reputation brings to Disibodenberg, "The sisters belong here," he tells her firmly. "This is their home, their calling. God would not ask them to abandon their vows of stability." But Hildegard knows better. The same divine voice that has guided her visions, that has revealed the mysteries of healing plants, that has dictated theological truths through her pen, now speaks with crystal clarity about this new path. The sisters must have their own foundation. What follows are months of careful negotiation, patient persistence, and unwavering faith. Hildegard writes letters to bishops, to abbots, to anyone who might support their cause. She presents her case not as rebellion, but as obedience to divine will. Brother Volmar, now her trusted collaborator in so many endeavors, supports her vision completely. "I have watched you receive guidance for years," he tells her quietly in the scriptorium one evening. "I have seen how accurately your visions prove themselves. If God is calling you to Rupertsberg, then Rupertsberg is where you must go." Rupertsberg. The name itself speaks of new beginnings, of rocky foundations that will prove unshakable, of heights that offer broader views. The site sits on the Rhine River, 20 miles from Disibodenberg, close enough to maintain connections, far enough to establish true independence. When permission finally comes, granted reluctantly by church authorities who cannot argue with Hildegard's documented divine guidance, the real work begins. Building a monastery from nothing requires resources they do not have, skills they must learn, determination they must summon daily. But Hildegard has spent decades preparing for this moment, though she did not know it at the time. Every lesson in organization learned while managing the women's quarters at Disibodenberg. Every skill in negotiation developed through years of correspondence. Every insight into human nature gained through counseling troubled souls. All of it serves her now. The sisters pack their few belongings, their precious manuscripts, their collection of healing herbs, their simple tools. Some families contribute what they can, moved by Hildegard's reputation for holiness, eager to support this unprecedented venture. The journey to Rupertsberg takes place on a crisp autumn morning in 1150. 18 women, their faces set with determination, their hearts full of hope, walking toward a future they will create with their own hands. Brother Volmar accompanies them, having received permission to continue serving as their scribe and spiritual advisor. His presence provides continuity, a bridge between their old life and their new beginning. The site at Rupertsberg offers stunning views of the Rhine Valley, but little else. No buildings, no gardens, no established infrastructure, just potential. Stretching as far as the eye can see, that first winter tests every resolve. They live in temporary wooden structures, sleeping on straw pallets, cooking over open fires, praying in a makeshift chapel. The wind from the river cuts through their simple robes. The work of construction leaves their hands raw and aching. The uncertainty of their future weighs on everyone's mind, but something remarkable happens during those difficult months. The community grows stronger, not weaker. Each challenge overcome together, each problem solved through collective wisdom, each small victory celebrated as a group. All of it weaves bonds that will last lifetimes. Hildegard proves herself not just a visionary, but a practical leader. She organizes work schedules that balance prayer, construction, and the copying of manuscripts that will provide income. She establishes relationships with local craftsmen who can teach the sisters necessary skills. She maintains correspondence with supporters who continue sending resources. Most importantly, she never loses sight of their spiritual purpose. Even while mixing mortar and laying stones, the sisters maintain their schedule of prayer, their commitment to learning, their dedication to serving God through excellence in all things. By spring, the first permanent buildings take shape, a chapel, modest but beautiful, where their voices will rise in daily worship, a scriptorium, carefully designed with the best light, where Hildegard's visions will continue to be recorded, a kitchen and refectory built with knowledge gained from years of herbal study, where food will be prepared as medicine for body and soul. The dormitory cells are simple, each containing a narrow bed, a writing desk, a small window facing east toward the rising sun, but they represent something precious, space for each sister to develop her individual relationship with the divine, privacy for personal prayer and study, room for the unique gifts each woman brings to flourish. As the buildings rise, so does Hildegard's confidence in this new path. The divine guidance that led them here continues to flow, revealing not just architectural plans, but organizational structures, daily rhythms, ways of living that honor both community and individual calling. Other women begin to arrive, drawn by reports of this unusual experiment. Daughters of noble families, widows seeking meaningful purpose, young women called to religious life but attracted to Hildegard's reputation for learning and independence. The community grows, not just in numbers, but in capability, in influence, in the depth of their shared commitment to this unprecedented way of serving God. By the time the first year ends, Rupertsberg Abbey stands as proof of what determined women can accomplish when given freedom to follow divine guidance, when supported by unshakable faith, when united in purpose that transcends individual limitations. Music of the Spheres. As the abbey settles into its rhythm of prayer and purpose, Hildegard begins to hear something new in the silence between the canonical hours, not the visions that have guided her since childhood, but melodies, pure and crystalline, flowing through her consciousness like water over stone. The traditional Gregorian chant that marks their daily worship, beautiful as it is, feels suddenly insufficient for the praise that wants to pour from her heart. These ancient melodies carry the prayers of centuries, but the divine fire burning within her requires something more, something that has never been sung before. In the quiet hours after Compline, when the sisters have retired to their cells, Hildegard finds herself humming phrases that seem to descend from the very throne of God. Brother Volmar, now traveling regularly from Disibodenberg to assist with her correspondence, notices her distraction during their usual sessions of recording visions. "Mother Hildegard," he ventures gently one autumn afternoon, "you seem to be listening to something I cannot hear." She pauses, her stylus hovering over the parchment where they have been transcribing her latest revelations about the nature of divine love. "Music," she whispers, "such music, Volmar, as if the angels themselves are teaching me their songs." And so begins another dimension of Hildegard's extraordinary calling. Just as she learned to trust her visions, to document her knowledge of healing herbs, to lead her sisters in establishing their independent community, now she must learn to capture these celestial melodies, to translate heavenly harmonies into earthly notation. The process proves both exhilarating and humbling. Unlike the traditional chant, with its measured, predictable intervals, these new compositions soar and dive with dramatic leaps, mirror the ecstatic nature of her mystical experiences, demand vocal ranges that stretch human capability toward divine possibility. Sister Richardis, whose voice has always been the sweetest in their choir, becomes Hildegard's first collaborator in this musical exploration. Together, they spend hours in the Abbey church, Hildegard humming the melodies that flow through her consciousness, Richardis learning to navigate their challenging intervals, to sustain their impossibly long phrases, to find breath enough for their soaring climaxes. "It is as if we are learning the language of paradise," Richardis murmurs after mastering a particularly difficult passage, her voice still echoing in the stone vault above them, as if our earthly voices are being trained for eternal worship. The other sisters, initially uncertain about these departures from familiar liturgical music, gradually recognize the profound spiritual power of Hildegard's compositions. During their daily offices, when these new songs replace traditional chants, the very atmosphere of their worship seems transformed, elevated, charged with divine presence in ways that leave them breathless with wonder. But it is Hildegard's great musical drama, the Ordo Virtutum, that represents the pinnacle of her compositional genius. Unlike anything created before, this sacred play tells the story of the human soul, torn between the competing claims of virtue and worldly temptation, ultimately choosing the path of righteousness through divine grace. The virtues, personified as female figures of commanding beauty and wisdom, sing in soaring melodies that seem to lift the very stones of the Abbey Church. Humility, charity, obedience, hope, each voice distinct yet harmonious, weaving together in musical tapestries of extraordinary complexity and power. Only the devil, representing all that opposes divine love, speaks rather than sings, his harsh guttural pronouncements a jarring contrast to the celestial harmonies surrounding him. "I cannot sing," Hildegard has him declare, "because I am cut off from the source of all music, from the divine harmony that gives meaning to every note." The sisters throw themselves into learning this unprecedented work, their voices stretching to accommodate its demands, their hearts opening to its profound theological insights. During their first complete performance, on the Feast of St. Rupert, the Abbey Church seems filled with invisible choirs, as if the angels themselves have descended to join their earthly praise. Visitors from neighboring monasteries, initially skeptical of reports about the unusual music emerging from Rupertsberg, find themselves moved to tears by what they witness. These are not mere songs, but prayers given wings, theology transformed into pure sound, divine truth expressed through melody in ways that penetrate directly to the soul. When we sing Mother Hildegard's compositions, Sister Richardis confides to a visiting abbess from Cologne, we feel ourselves becoming instruments of divine praise, our voices merged with the music of the spheres, our earthly worship joined to the eternal song of creation. The daily rhythm of the Abbey now pulses with this musical dimension. Morning prayers rise on melodies that seem to call the sun itself into being. Vespers descend through harmonies that mirror the peaceful settling of twilight. The great feast days explode in vocal celebrations that transform the stone church into a resonating chamber of pure joy. Hildegard herself, now in her 50s, finds in music perhaps the most direct expression of her mystical experiences. Where words sometimes fail to capture the intensity of her visions, where even her detailed theological writings cannot fully convey the reality of divine encounter, music succeeds, carrying both singer and listener into direct communion with the sacred. "All creation is symphony," she writes to a fellow abbess who has requested copies of her compositions. "The planets in their courses, the seasons in their turning, the human heart in its longing for God, all participate in the great cosmic song that began with the first word of creation and will continue until time itself is gathered into eternity." The music flowing from Rupertsberg Abbey, like everything else Hildegard touches, challenges conventional boundaries, expands possibilities, opens new pathways for human encounter with the divine. Her compositions will outlive the stone walls that first contained them, carrying forward through centuries the unique voice of a woman who dared to sing heaven's songs with earthly breath, who transformed the limitations of human vocal cords into instruments capable of expressing the inexpressible mystery of divine love. Legacy of light, and as the centuries unfold, As kingdoms rise and fall around the enduring stones of Rupertsberg, Hildegard's voice continues to echo through corridors of time she could never have imagined. Her manuscripts travel from monastery to monastery, copied by careful hands that recognize something precious, something that must not be lost. The visions she feared to speak as a child become beacons for seekers across generations. Her healing knowledge saves lives in plague years. Her music lifts spirits in times of darkness and doubt. What she created was more than any single discipline could contain. Not just theology, not just medicine, not just music, but a way of seeing the world as interconnected, alive with divine presence in every leaf, every stone, every human breath. Her holistic vision challenges the boundaries that others draw between sacred and secular, between body and spirit, between earth and heaven. She shows us that healing the body is spiritual work, that studying plants is prayer, that composing music is prophecy, that leading a community is an act of divine collaboration. In her writings about the natural world, we find the seeds of ecological wisdom that feels remarkably contemporary. She understood what we are only now remembering, that human health and the health of the earth are inseparable, that we are not separate from nature but woven into its fabric, participants in a cosmic dance of elements and energies that she called the web of creation. Her detailed observations of herbs and their properties, her understanding of the body's relationship to seasonal rhythms, her insight into the healing power of music and color, all flow from this fundamental recognition of interconnectedness. The kitchen garden at Rupertsberg continues to flourish long after her death, tended by sisters who carry forward her knowledge, who remember which plants ease fever, which combinations restore strength after illness, how to prepare the bitter herbs that cleanse, the sweet ones that comfort. They sing her antiphons while they work, their voices rising with the steam from healing broths, creating an atmosphere where medicine and prayer become indistinguishable, where every act of care becomes an offering. Her influence spreads far beyond monastery walls. Physicians seek copies of her medical texts. Musicians attempt to capture the ethereal quality of her compositions. Mystics study her visions for guidance in their own spiritual journeys. She becomes a bridge between worlds, showing that intellectual rigor and mystical experience can coexist, that scientific observation and divine revelation can inform each other, that a life of contemplation can also be a life of practical service and creative innovation. The abbess who once struggled to speak of her visions becomes a voice that cannot be silenced. Her correspondence with popes and emperors, her fearless criticism of corruption in the church, her defense of her sisters' right to their unique practices all demonstrate a courage rooted in absolute certainty of her divine calling. She shows future generations of women that spiritual authority is not something granted by earthly institutions, but something recognized, claimed, and exercised in faithful response to inner truth. As evening light filters through the windows of Rupertsberg Abbey, casting long shadows across the scriptorium where her works were first recorded, we can almost see her there, still writing, still composing, still tending the endless work of translation between divine mystery and human understanding. The quill moves steadily across parchment, Brother Volmar's faithful presence at her side. Both of them aware they are participating in something larger than themselves, creating works that will outlast their mortal frames. The garden outside grows quiet as day fades into dusk, but the life force Hildegard called viriditas continues to pulse through every growing thing. The green energy of creation itself, never diminished, always renewing. This is perhaps her greatest gift to us. This recognition that the same creative power that moves in plants and seasons also moves in human hearts, in artistic inspiration, in the impulse to heal, in the courage to speak truth, in the capacity to love beyond the boundaries of self. Her abbey becomes a model for communities that honor both contemplation and action, both individual spiritual development and collective responsibility, both rootedness in tradition and openness to innovation. the rhythm of life she establishes there, prayer and work flowing seamlessly together, intellectual pursuit and practical service supporting each other, creates a template for integrated living that remains relevant across centuries. As darkness settles over the Rhine Valley, the same darkness that once frightened a child experiencing mysterious visions, we understand that Hildegard transformed her relationship with the unknown, learned to trust the light that comes from within, discovered that what seems like personal revelation often contains gifts meant for the wider world. Her courage to speak, to write, to compose, to lead, to challenge, to heal, opens pathways for all who come after her, all who struggle to honor both their inner calling and their outer responsibilities. The kitchen fires bank low for the night, but the warmth they've generated continues to radiate through stone walls, through sleeping sisters, through the timeless work of nourishing both body and spirit. Tomorrow there will be new herbs to gather, new melodies to learn, new letters to write, new seekers to counsel. But tonight there is simply the peace of work well done, of gifts freely shared, of a life lived in faithful response to divine invitation. And so Hildegard's legacy flows forward like the Rhine itself, carrying the accumulated wisdom of one extraordinary life into futures she could never have imagined, touching lives in ways both seen and unseen, reminding us that every human being carries unique gifts meant for the healing of the world, that every voice raised in truth adds to the cosmic symphony, that every act of love participates in the ongoing creation of the universe, and that the light which illuminated her visions continues to shine in every heart brave enough to trust its own deepest knowing, to speak its own truth, to offer its own gifts in service of the greater good that connects us all.